was absolutely amazing. I loved listening to you, Colin, and thank you, Emily, for hosting that interview. We do want to move on to you, Emily. Yes, and I actually feel that I actually want to say a little bit more about you, Emily, because I don't think I gave you justice in your introduction. So I do want to introduce you a little bit more, because not only are you an academic and a poet, you've actually published work, but you also recently became a senior lecturer in post-colonial literature at Leeds Beckett University. So that, I know you've been lecturing there, but the new role of senior lecturer.
Actually, Khadijah, it's a reader now.
Oh,
a reader, but yeah, reader. And I said this to my, I told my son about my promotion. He said, I said, I'm a reader now. And he said, yeah, so big, wow, you can read. I can read.
And I think that's, you know, and it's so amazing for him to kind of really get an understanding and grasp what that means for his mother, you know, that celebration. So I really wanted to kind of elaborate a little bit more on that, because, you know, you've got this specialism around Caribbean culture and resistance, Caribbean literature and carnival culture. And I know that you've been published quite widely in the field of Anansi's Journey, a story of Jamaican cultural resistance at the University of the West Indies, but also the American Trickster, Trauma, Traditions and Bear Rabbit. So I really thought that I should really drop that in so people know that you're more than just a senior lecturer, you are now a reader. And that they can actually look out for your publications as well. And I know that you've been heavily involved in the Caribbean carnival culture as part of your academic research as well.
Yes, yes.
So
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I just wanted to do that. And so now, if you don't mind, Emily, if you can introduce what you're doing. But should I give you a song? I think I should give you a song.
I'm happy to. I'm ready for a song. A song from you, Khadijah, is always a blessing.
Yeah, I thought I would just go a little bit old school for some of our listeners now. The last one that I just played was Desmond Dekker, You Can Get It If You Really Want. And my mother was moving her legs. And this is something else that we used to watch on TV. It's by Matumbi and it's Empire Road. So welcome, Emily, please.
Thank you, Khadijah, and I hope we get to see your mum at the end of this as well, and that she comes.
She's so comfortable in front of the gas fire with her legs up, just listening. But hopefully we'll get her on screen so you can all say hello to her. So
that would be nice.
You're most welcome. So Emily, over to you.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk about. Thank you for that introduction, Khadijah. And as Khadijah says, you know, one of my main areas of interest is oral storytelling and the gathering of stories. And as Colin has said, it's hugely important, I think, to listen and to gather the stories of our ancestors. As some of you know, my mum passed away last year, and I spent an hour recording every decade of her life. So I have 7 hours of interviews with her, which record her life story. So I've always been really obsessed with the idea of not letting go of stories. And so I just want to tell you a little bit about my grandfather and his story, his Caribbean story. Now, he wasn't part of the Windrush generation because he was from the French Caribbean, from Martinique. And he came over to France in 1946. And his story echoes the Windrush story, the story of that generation. He came to Paris. He came alone to try and make it as a writer. In his letters home, he writes about the difficulties of being in Paris, in a sort of a black man in a sea of white faces, of trying to make it as a writer, of living in rented accommodation and eating really bad food and missing his wife and missing his children. But sometimes he's very excited about Paris and he says, you must come and see it for yourself. It's an amazing place. And then in some of his other letters, he's really, really dispirited. In the end, my mother and her siblings joined my grandfather, and he did become a very successful writer. Now, I'm going to, first of all, share a passage from his book. So my grandfather wrote a book about growing up in colonial Martinique and how he was, in a way, saved by his grandmother from a life in the cane fields. He grew up in a very, very poor village where all the families, including the children, worked in the cane fields. His grandmother that he lived with made huge sacrifices to make sure that he didn't have that kind of fate. And so she worked in the field so that she could fund his education and he could go to school. So he had a great deal of pressure on him. When he moved to France, he wrote a book about his life called Black Chaque Alley. In France, it's called La Rue Cazenègre, and it tells the story of how little really things had changed since emancipation for Black people in colonial Martinique. So it's quite a hard-hitting film, but it's a film which also celebrates Creole culture. It celebrates the people of Martinique and the richness of their culture. And one of the sections of the book and the film that I want to focus on is a section on storytelling. When my grandfather was a boy, there was a man in his life called Monsieur Medouz. Monsieur Medouz had worked all his life on a plantation, cutting cane, but he was also a fantastic storyteller, and my grandfather looked up to him as a mentor. And Medouz was one of the few people. Colin was talking about a silence between generations, a silence around trauma. And Medouz was one of the few people in the village who would talk to my grandfather about his African ancestors and the fact that his ancestors had been stolen from Africa to work in Martinique. So I'm just going to read you a passage from Black Chaque Alley, where my grandfather writes about Monsieur Medouz. In addition to Petit Morne and its workers and to ourselves, we knew that the world extended even further beyond the factory whose chimneys we could see, and that on the other side of the hill surrounding the plantations lay other similar plantations. We also knew there was a town, Fort-de-France, with many vehicles in the streets. Montine had already told me about a far-off country called France, where people had white skin and spoke something called French, a country from which came the flour that we used to make bread and cakes, and which all sorts of beautiful other things were made. On some nights, either in his tales or in his talks, Monsieur Medouz evoked another country even further away, even deeper than France, which was that of his father, Guinea. There, people were not people like him and me, but they did not die of tiredness nor of hunger. There was no misery as there was here. Nothing stranger than to see Monsieur Medouz evoke Guinea, to hear the voice rising from his entrails as he spoke of slavery and related the horrible story his father had told him, of the rape of his family, of the disappearance of his 9 uncles and aunts, of his grandfather and his grandmother. Every time my father tried to relate his life story, he continued, once he got to it, I had a big brother called Usman, a younger sister called Sonia, the last one. He would shut his eyes very tight and fall silent all of a sudden. And I too would bite my lips as if I had received a stab in my heart. I was young, my father said, when all the blacks fled from the plantations because it had been said that slavery was over. I too danced with joy and went running all over Martinique because for a long time I had so wanted to flee, to run away. But when the intoxication of my freedom was spent, I was forced to remark that nothing had changed for me nor my comrades in chains. I hadn't found my brothers and sisters, nor my father, nor my mother. I remained like all the blacks in this damn country. The Bekes kept the land, all the land in the country, and we continued working for them. The Lord forbade them from whipping us, but did not force them to pay our due. Yes, he added, at any rate, we remained under the Beke, attached to this land, and he remained our master. Naturally, Monsieur Medouz was then angry, and in vain I looked at him with a frown on my brow. In vain I had this maddening urge to hit the Beke I had set eyes on. I could not make out all he was grumbling, and to console him, I said to him, if you were to go to Guinea, Monsieur Medouz, you know I would go with you. I think Montine wouldn't mind. Alas, he said with a sad smile, Medouz won't be seeing Guinea. Besides, I have no mama, no papa, no brothers or sisters in Guinea. Yes, when I am dead, I'll go to Guinea, but then I won't be able to take you. You'll be old enough, but then I mustn't. So this is the bit, I think, in the film and in the book that really struck a chord with me when I was little, and which is why I went on as well to study oral storytelling and to research folklore. I just want to show you that clip from the film. The film was made by a young woman called Uzan Palsi, who went on to be the first director of a film by a black woman that made it to Hollywood. And she came to see my grandfather and said, I love the book, I must make it into a film. She was only in her 20s at the time. She was a Martinique woman, and it's a fantastic film. Just before I show you the clip of the film, I just want to read a poem that I have dedicated to Montine, who's the character also in the book. She's my great-great-grandmother. And in many ways, I think without her, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. It's thanks to her sacrifices that I'm living the kind of life that I lead now. So this is a poem about Montine. And it's about how Montine refused to let my grandfather, Joseph Zobel, cut cane. Don't let the boy cut cane. Don't let the boy cut cane. Let him stand in a white uniform, starched overnight in zinc buckets. His hands, don't let them furrow and crack like dark cane field earth, not baked by beating suns, not split by the cutlass, not burnt in the boiling house. Let his fingers be oiled and smell sweet, but not of sugar. Let them poise the pen over paper, wear fine gloves in French white winters, hone red pencils, swing strong leather satchels, while I force my slow rolling hips into the field, for the cane must be cut. Okay, so now I'm going to end with showing a short clip from the film Black Chakali, which shows the interaction between Medouz and José. So over to our technical wizard, Zoe.
Je dors pas, tu sais. J'essaie de reposer mon vieux corps. Saloperie de canne. Y.
Yekrak.
3 fois belle compte.
Tous les coques sont bandits.
Y.
Yekrak.
Aboubou.
Ya.
Il était une fois, à la Martinique, un vieux nègre, triste et laid. Un menteur dirait laid comme José. Mais moi, qui suis pas menteur du tout, je dirais laid comme Médou. Tous les jours, le vieux nègre parlait de son pays. Y.
Yekrak.
Yémistikrik.
Yemistikrak.
Ce pays s'appelait Afrique. Le pays de mon papa. Le pays du papa de ton papa. Oui.
Crac.
Et le vieux nègre, triste et laid, qui toute sa jeunesse avait pleuré toutes les larmes de son corps, me disait comme ça, tout le temps, Médouze, mon fils, ton vieux papa va partir là-haut et il va jamais comprendre ce qui est arrivé quand les Blancs ont débarqué ici. Et le vieux nègre disait encore, j'avais un grand frère, Ousmane, et une petite sœur, Sorna. Les hommes blancs nous ont chassés, attrapés avec des lassos. Et puis, après des jours et des jours, à travers la brousse, ils nous ont amenés au bord de la grande eau. Et puis un jour, on nous a débarqués ici, on nous a vendus pour couper la canne de ces blancs qu'on appelle béquets. Yékrik!
Yekrak.
J'étais jeune garçon, comme toi, Médouze. Lorsque tous les nègres marrons étaient descendus des mornes avec des bâtons, des coutelas, des fusils, des flambeaux, ils avaient envahi la ville de Saint-Pierre, incendié toutes les habitations. Pour la première fois, les nègres voyaient les blancs trembler, s'enfermer dans leurs belles maisons et mourir. C'est comme ça que l'esclavage est fini. Yékrik!
Yekrak.
Et il disait, ah mon fils, j'ai couru tellement, et je crois même que j'avais fait le tour de la Martinique. Lorsque mes pieds ont refusé d'aller plus loin, j'ai regardé devant, j'ai regardé derrière, et j'ai vu que j'étais revenu à la rue Casse-Nègre. Il n'y avait plus qu'à retourner à la canne. On était libre, mais on avait le ventre vide. Le maître était devenu le patron. Alors, je suis resté comme tous les autres nègres dans ce maudit pays. C'est comme ça que parlait mon vieux papa. Mais ça n'a pas changé, mon fils. Les béquets gardent toutes les terres du pays. La loi interdit de nous fouetter, mais ne les oblige pas à nous payer comme il faut.
Si tu pars en Afrique, monsieur Médouze, tu sais, je avec toi.
Et là, chiche-moi. Médouze n'ira jamais en Afrique. Médouze n'a plus personne en Afrique. C'est quand je serai mort, que mon vieux corps sera là-dessous, que j'irai en Afrique. Je ne pourrai pas t'amener. retournerons tous un jour en Afrique. T'en fais pas.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you very much. That was amazing, and I've actually been quite fortunate to see all of that film, Black Shack Alley. Is absolutely amazing. And so I think we've got a link, haven't we, there? I think Elizabeth's been able to put a link in the chat where people can actually find Black Shack Alley. So, and I know that's about your grandfather, right?
That's right. That's absolutely. And then so we've got so you can get the film. I've got all the merch and the book, but there's a new Penguin edition of the book in English, which has just come out, which is a really beautiful edition.
Yeah, that's amazing, because often when we think about the Caribbean, we more often speak about the English Caribbean, but there's the Caribbean is extended through the French-speaking Caribbean, the Spanish-speaking Caribbean, so it's very diverse and very, very rich. And so it's really good to get that other side of the narrative in terms of Martinique. I've had the pleasure of going to Martinique, by the way, so I know it's such a beautiful place. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't Martinique mean garden of flowers? Or
yes,
yeah,
yes. And I hear I hear that you spent a night dancing to zouk music.
I sure did. I sure did, which to me it's quite interesting. And we are going to move on, but because we're going to talk about stories, but I think that's such a beautiful story in terms of how we tell stories. But even when I think about the zouk dancing, and when I was doing it, I thought, this just feels like Lovers Rock in terms of reggae music. So there's similarities in terms of movement of the body. Is we can see how movement and music has journeyed through the Caribbean, but has made that journey from Africa into the Caribbean, and still has a sense of resistance within the people and within the storytelling. So thank you for sharing that with us, Emily.
Thank you.